That's the best bit. Don't worry, Joss, the number of times I've been caught. Be seated, please. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's full council meeting. Welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, those in the conference hall, and those watching this meeting via our YouTube channel. For those in the building, I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Ali, Cheney, Davis, Goggin, Grant and Rippington. Are there any other apologies?
Yes, my Lord Mayor. Councillor Leslie Alexander and Councillor Chris Windows.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Please can I ask whether any councillors have any interests to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 12th of September 2023 and the extraordinary full council meeting of 10th October 2023 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
I second those minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Can I take that the minutes are agreed? Thank you. Lord Mayor's business. It's that time of year again, and nominations are now open for the Lord Mayor's medals. These medals recognise outstanding and innovative unpaid service and support provided to others, especially selfless service to a voluntary body or to our community, or which brings distinction and quality to Bristol life. Nominations are open until the 31st of December, and you should consider that to be a hard deadline. And further details are available on the Bristol City Council website. A second item of Lord Mayor's business. You will all be aware that Councillor Paul Goggin has been extremely ill over the recent weeks and months, and I'd like you all to join me in welcoming him back to the chamber. Thank you, Paul. Paul will be with us for a little while, and I'm sure that many of you will want to catch a word with him if you can. Paul, did you want to say anything, or are you still out of breath?
I'm a little out of breath. I brought my own cylinder of oxygen with me. Thank you. Thank you for clapping that I've managed to stay alive. Debs is my hero. She was the one who had to watch me in a coma on the ECMO machine. 6 to 8 weeks of being unconscious and being told constantly that I was going to die. So she's the strong one, not me. So the applause is for her. I'm having to go back to the hospital after this, unfortunately. I've snuck out, don't tell anyone. And I'm hoping to be out within the next couple of weeks and then be back with you as and when, soon hopefully. But You're in very capable hands. The other person who's been absolutely fantastic in supporting me is the Acting Lord Mayor, Councillor Pearce, as well. Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated. And I'll let you get on with the meeting now. I'll stay here just for a little bit, and then I'll have to shoot off, I think.
Okay, well, don't stand on ceremony when you're ready. When you've had enough, just clear off. I wasn't nervous about chairing this meeting until he walks in. Recent days, I've performed a couple of Lord Mayor's engagements, and on Saturday, I was at a street market, which was excellent. I love a good street market. So if any of you have any events taking place in your wards that you'd like, even if it's an envelope being opened, Paul or I will probably be there for you. Right, public forum, agenda item 6. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on our website. As this is an extraordinary meeting, only public forum related to the agenda items has been accepted. I'll go through the list, calling on those that have indicated they planned to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. There were no public forum petitions received for this meeting. There were a total of 5 public statements received. A list will be displayed on the screen. There they are. 3 members of the public indicated that they planned to attend and speak to their statements. They're displayed on the screen, and we will run through those statements in order. I'll invite each person to speak for 1 minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind they were published for councillors, the mayor and the public to read in advance of the meeting. First, do we have Bristol Tree Forum?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It is impossible in 1 minute to address the many flaws in this important document, yet this is our only opportunity to speak to you all in person. The draft before you is pitifully bad. Not only is it missing key information which is essential for us to understand the impact of what is being proposed, but it is also tearing up your ecological and climate emergency declarations and undermining your promise to protect Bristol's green spaces. Key policies for protecting green spaces have been watered down. For example, it now says that significant harm to site of nature conservation interest will not be permitted. Before, it was harm. That will not be permitted. The document is full of words should and may, but there is hardly a will or shall in sight.
Can you think about winding up, please?
Under the terms of this document, the centre of Bristol will become a tree desert, as any replacement trees to replace those lost to development will end up being planted in its outskirts or even outside the city. If you push this plan through, we will soon see hundreds of green places that no longer have protection being gobbled up by developers. Bristol will be destroyed.
Thank you. Public statement number 3, Dominic Hogg. Thank you, Dominic. You've got a minute.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Following on from the Tree Forum statement, I think there are issues around the plan in terms of its soundness. And whilst all of us, especially those of us who've been in this chamber for Development Control Committee hearings, want to see a new plan, let's make sure it's sound enough to go through the inspection process. Otherwise, we're just going to be put back in time. But those issues of soundness aside, again, on climate and ecological emergency, I don't see anything in this plan that takes us towards, for example, 30% of land being managed for the benefit of nature. I also see a policy on embodied carbon that basically says it's okay to use more carbon building big and yet encouraging everyone to build big. That means you are going to expend more carbon in your construction process than you need to. There is nothing in the plan of land use that actually supports you taking yourself to that 30% of land managed for nature. And you've got the bare minimum 10% biodiversity net gain in your policy. Why can't you be more aspirational? Without that, you will be, as the Tree Forum has said, turning this place, you'll not be improving the natural capital of this city.
Thank you. Adblock Bristol.
Adblock Bristol wish to celebrate the Council's refusal of over 40 new, large, energy-hungry digital advertising screens in the city over the past 5 years. Well done. It has been the case that several of these refusals have been overturned by the Secretary of State on appeal by the advertising company. We therefore strongly welcome the improved guidance on advertising in the new local plan, particularly against digital billboards, hoping that it will strengthen the hand of the Council in refusing any future applications. We particularly welcome the inclusion of a policy that will guard against the disproportionate placement of intrusive advertising screens in less wealthy areas of the city. Adblock looks forward to the time when all corporate advertising is banned in public spaces in Bristol, for safer streets, darker skies, and a culture focused not on material consumption, but on community, connection, a thriving local economy, and sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Having gone through those who indicated attendance, is anyone else here that didn't indicate? No? Okay, thank you. We'll now move to the public questions received. The questions received have been published on the website and are shared on screen now. Are they? Yes. 7 questions were received from 7 members of the public, and 4 of those have indicated that they wish to attend. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, please read your question out and we will try to show the question on the screen. The Mayor will reply verbally. Following the response from the Mayor, you will be invited to ask a supplementary question. Rob Breyer, please ask your question.
I won't read all the preamble. It's just a question about the local plan and a document within it called Transport SPD. I was just wondering if you currently have a timescale for when you expect that Transport SPD to be produced and adopted.
Yeah, the indicative programme for developing the SPD will start in November once the local plan is out to publication, and then we'll pull together a draft for March 2024, and we'll be running a series of workshops and engagement programmes around that, but the SPD will remain in draft throughout the examination period of the local plan.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you. And the second question is, so it's about a particular site that's been allocated within the draft local plan, 222 to 232 Church Road. Please can you tell me whether there are any current plans to compulsory purchase the site from its current owner?
Yeah, that would be a very expensive way to go about it, but can I hand over to Nicola? I think she had a particular insight into this.
Yeah. Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Marvin. I think if it reassures you, Rob, the current local councillor, Councillor Asher Craig, I'll speak on her behalf, and I have done a lot of work with the owners of the higher station site over recent years, both in terms of enforcement and welfare of that building, which is, I'm sure we can agree, is in a horrid state, and also now it's allocated for housing, bringing that site forward for housing. We don't have to CPO that site to give it a better future, and I think we need to continue to campaign, as your local ward councillor currently is, to make sure that happens.
Do you have a supplementary, Rob?
Okay, that's really reassuring. That's great. Just wondered just a supplementary question, what we can do to sort of further that campaign in your view, like what the best way of approaching that is to get that to come to fruition.
I suggest you get in touch, Rob. So drop me or Asher an email, and more than happy, to join forces, and let's get this site built for housing.
Thanks very much. Peter Ellis. Thank you. You have a question on the local plan as well?
I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Draft policy NZC3 has differential targets for proposed residential buildings depending on the number of stories. A kilogram of carbon has the same impact on the city's carbon ambitions. So will the Mayor explain why the proposed targets for, say, a 30-storey tall building are less onerous than, say, the modern-day equivalent of the familiar 4-storey Georgian terraced house?
Well, we'll get onto it in a minute when I talk about local plan, but it'd be great if we could give everyone a 4-storey Georgian house, but unfortunately the land restrictions in the city don't enable that if we're going to solve the housing crisis and protect land for nature. Look, different targets are applied to residential buildings of 5 stories or greater, and at this scale, all developments are expected to be multi-dwelling apartments rather than housings representing different building types. So the Building Safety Act classes buildings with 2 or more dwellings or over 18 metres tall as higher risk, and buildings above 18 metres face stricter fire safety standards and are currently very unlikely to be able to use timber to reduce carbon, unlike houses. So there will need to be buildings above 5 stories if we're going to meet the city's housing need in our confined 42 square miles. Policies need to be evidence-based to pass examination, and these targets are supported by evidence that shows they are practicable and viable, and details will be in a topic paper that will be published alongside the local plan. And the same targets apply to a 5-storey and a 30-storey building, so it's not totally fair to say the targets give undue advantage to high-rise buildings. It's also going to be an inevitable consequence of putting the buildings in the right places. So as we try to maximise the number of people living on brownfield sites within active travel distance of the main retail, employment and entertainment zones, to eliminate the need for cars and even the use of public transport, they can be involved in active travel, that we will need inevitably to have density, and at some point that's going to mean some height.
Peter, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. So basically, we are looking at a plan which deliberately encourages buildings with greater carbon impact. So my question is the Mayor aware in doing so that the proposed target for taller buildings is getting on for a third less ambitious than REBA's 2030 climate change challenge? And indeed, the REBA encourages the design of buildings which are currently in construction to come into operation in 2025 to look further than that and to look to the 2030 target. This plan, which runs to 2040, is only equivalent to the 2025 target, not the 2030 target.
Do you have a question here, Peter?
Yes, my question is the Mayor aware, given he said that the policies were evidence-based, that the REBA 2030 climate change challenge target is getting on for a third more ambitious than his own target?
Our officers will be, all over this, as we have a group of dedicated officers committed to our carbon targets. But again, I don't think it's as straightforward as it may be portraying. So what you talked about was carbon per square metre. If two people living in a 4-storey Georgian house, right, has a different relationship to carbon targets than a development of higher density where you have more people living per square meter. So, and actually, if you have that, and it's not just in the construction of the building, if you build the right kind of buildings in the wrong locations and you don't have higher density in the middle of the city and therefore encourage, drive, require urban sprawl, you will build in dependency on private cars and other forms of transport that require the use of fossil fuels. And that in itself will have a big impact on the way the city functions. So it's not just taking one dynamic in isolation is not the way we can think about city design. When we're thinking about our buildings, it's not just about the right buildings, it's the right buildings in the right locations, so we design the way the city functions, not just the buildings in which people work. But we'll be happy to take questions outside of this forum and talk to our planning team about our approach to city development.
Question 5, Dan Aykroyd. You've got a question on minutes.
The minutes now for the committee meeting on the 10th of October do not seem to contain the normal items that are usually on those minutes, including members present and apologies for absence, should they be there.
Meeting.
It's the Lord Mayor's meeting.
It is my meeting, and oh yes. It's about me. I recall that now. The extraordinary full council meeting of 10th October was called at short notice to appoint an acting Lord Mayor. This was due to the Lord Mayor being unable to discharge his duties due to poor health. As members had less than 2 weeks' notice of the meeting, it was deemed unreasonable to take a formal attendance record. The meeting was quorate with over 18 members in attendance. I hope that's helpful. Dan? Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. I believe it is current council policy to list those items in the minutes of meetings. I checked and they've been listed for the past 4 extraordinary meetings. There is a legitimate expectation that the council follows the current policy, and if it doesn't do that, then it's possibly a breach of natural justice. I realise it's not the biggest question in the world, but not the biggest issue in the world, but there is an issue with Bristol City Council not having the best minutes keeping. Please, can this be looked at?
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to dodge this one and send it the monitoring officer's way.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will prepare a response for Mr. Ackroyd in writing and share it with you before we send it out.
Thank you. Adblock Bristol, question 6.
Dodging the opening, this really follows on from the statement about digital screens, and we would like to draw attention to the ongoing proliferation of poster advertising sites on fences and walls around the city. These have been placed without planning advertising permission and seem to be immune from any enforcement action. What is the council doing to eliminate this form of advertising?
Well, what I would say is we're doing our best in line with the wider challenge of tackling litter and then reducing the generation of waste and all the other things we're trying to do with the city system. But it is something that pains me when I walk around the city. And so we have had a team on it. We're working with responsible private companies that look to inform people about what is happening in the city. So we do make it possible. But, unfortunately, people will go out and fly poster anyway. The business model we have is to place poster sites on privately owned walls and structures that are often tagged or fly posted, and they actually help solve problems for the property owners by tidying them up. But we don't want it as a proliferation and a chaotic approach. We do engage with businesses and we do manage them where we can, and where we can get the evidence together, we do enforce against illegal fly posters. Just to say that the policy for advertising was added to the local plan in response to comments and suggestions we received during the consultation. So, it will strengthen our approach to managing the impacts, of new advertisements.
Do you have a supplementary? Thank you very much. That concludes the questions received from members of the public. I'd like to inform members of the public that the expected finish for today's meeting is 7:30. I invite you to remain if you would like to hear the other agenda items. If not, please leave as quietly as possible. Agenda item 7, petitions notified by councillors. There have been no councillor petitions received for this meeting. Agenda item 8, Bristol local plan. Mayor Rees, I believe you're going to move the report.
Thank you, Stephen. I know I'm tight. Do you mind if I start when I put my stopwatch on so I can keep track? There you go. So the raw material of Bristol, as I've shared many times, we've got 42 square miles. We're not getting any more land. 472,000 people, one of the fastest growing cities outside London, with a population predicted to be 550,000 by 2050, and 20,000 households on our waiting list, over 1,300 households in temporary accommodation. Our challenges in Bristol is how we make use of that 42 square miles in the face of the challenges and the opportunities that are in front of us. This local plan and the incredible work that's been put into it offers us a blueprint for the city's future. It will become part of the statutory development plan for the city, and it will be used to guide decisions on planning applications in Bristol. At the heart of the plan is the drive to deliver 34,650 new homes by 2040. And it is important to say it's prepared in the context of the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which we've committed ourselves to delivering. The current plan was agreed in 2014. It is now out of date. The landscape and the context of Bristol has changed, and we must have an up-to-date local plan to guide the development of our city's future. And we must be purposeful about what we do and where we do it, how we use our land in the face of the challenges and opportunities that are in front of us. If we have a plan that is out of date, it will undermine local democratic control. Weight will be taken away from our local policies and possibly taken to a national planning policy framework. Developers will be able to challenge us, overrule existing allocations in favour of their own approaches. We will be facing a prospect of development happening in Bristol in a haphazard way, unrelated to health services, educational services and transport priorities. A piecemeal approach that could be the worst for our city. And we'd also be failing in our statutory duty. So some of the headlines from the plan sets out 11 areas of urban regeneration with the potential for at least 17,000 new homes, limiting Greenbelt development to 3 sites with potential for 1,200 homes: Bath Road, Bridgington, Bishopsworth, Ashton Vale. The regeneration and the efficient use of land with some Greenbelt release enabling capacity for 1,925 homes per year, adding up to that total I mentioned earlier. Space for offices, plans to provide 164,000 square metres of new office floor space, a focus on shopping centres and local economies, all across city, protecting biodiversity and green infrastructure, underpinning our commitment to net zero and tackling the climate emergency. And in my final few moments, I just want to thank Nicola and all those councillors who have worked cross-party on this for 2 years. It's been an incredibly challenging piece of work, not least because the Combined Authority has not been involved. So it's been up to our local authority itself, working cooperatively as possible with our neighbours on their duty to cooperate as well, to make sure we are as close to a regional approach to our land use as we can be and must be. But thank you for all the work that you've put into this across the divides in this chamber.
Councillor Beach.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very proud here to be bringing the local plan tonight to us for this vote. It's quite a moment, so I think before we go, there are a few thank yous. First, to our cross-party working group members who've put an invaluable contribution into this process. Secondly, to our officers over there on the left who have worked so incredibly hard, and the public of Bristol as well, who've participated in this process throughout the 4 years. This is a plan for people. It's a plan for nature, it's a plan for a net zero future, and it's a plan for living well in our city. A plan that combines homes, jobs, culture, green spaces, public health, and economic inclusion. When confronting the growth challenge Bristol faces, we had some choices from the start. We either urbanise in or we sprawl out. Together, as a group, we chose to urbanise. To promote sustainable travel, we gravitated to our city's transport network. The hunt was on, to find brownfield land for new jobs and new homes. Homes and jobs capacity was then modelled along these transport corridors. Now familiar names to many of us here, such as Froome Gateway, Atlas Place, Western Harbour and Temple Quarter, were all formed at this time. This plan also prepares for future transport connections. So in walks Hicks Gate on the A4. A significant place-making opportunity for a new community outside Brislington, the only urban extension in this plan. As a group, we discussed and resolved that this site, along with one other small site on Elspeth Drive, were appropriate for Greenbelt release. And I'm now really pleased to be working with Baines to combine our efforts both sides of that boundary to shape a place-making scheme the West of England can be proud of. As an administration, I've always strived to build towards an inclusive and healthy city, but you can only achieve this by hundreds of value-based nudges in policy to get the city that we want to build, and this is what we've done together. We want a Bristol to be affordable, so we've set out our expectations on affordable homes, introducing affordable student accommodation and for the first time a commitment to affordable workspaces. We want Bristol to be sustainable, so our new buildings will be made to high energy efficiency standards, maximising on-site energy generation. We want to build balanced communities, so we're capping student accommodation, strengthening our approach to HMOs, developing new policies for affordable older people's housing, and also protecting our cultural venues. We want Bristol to be nature-rich, so we've protected our ecologically important sites, removing some development allocations when these were on SNCIs. We've mandated swift bricks, pollinator infrastructure, we've banned artificial grass from new development. And we want Bristol to be inclusive, to avoid the harmful impacts of gentrification that we see in some places in Bristol today. New developments will have to have community uses on their ground floor. Public toilets will be baked into development, and we've reclassified our high streets and local centres to protect and enhance our shops in future. This plan will build a better Bristol, a Bristol that harnesses new development and enables our communities to flourish, achieving our values. I'm going to close now, but I just want to say how proud I am to bring this excellent plan forward tonight, and I look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Beach, can I just ask you to formally second?
I'm formally seconding the motion. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. I'd like to call on Councillor Bartle to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you. Thanks for the speeches so far. I'd like to echo that I've been really happy with how well the cross-party working group has functioned, how well the officers have been able to answer our many, many questions. So well done to everyone involved. The policies before us are evidence-based and realistic, and will bring us up to the best standard that national planning policy will allow our ambitions to create. We need these updates to deliver the housing our residents deserve at pace. There are dozens of policies, and I've got 3 minutes, so I've just kind of picked my best ones. So, as is obligatory to remark, this council has declared a climate and ecological emergency, and this plan is an example of how that isn't just symbolic. This is the best balance between building the numbers that we need and addressing these emergencies. It's the best we can do. We've worked so hard on that particular issue. These policies will mean new homes come with a cheaper heating bill, contribute far less to our carbon footprint to build, and bring a welcome increase of trees and nature into developed sites. To vote against this plan would be to vote to prolong the harmful environmental impacts of our current mode of development, something we can't afford to do. I'm also very pleased with the approach to maximising affordable housing this plan takes. The innovation to make developers include affordable units in their designs from the outset, no matter what their viability assessment says, means that we can have significantly more opportunities to deliver housing at a price normal people can hope to pay. It also compels developers to actually try to deliver the affordable dwellings if they can't provide it themselves by seeking public subsidy, and to provide even more than the minimum target if they can. Greens are also very supportive of the evidence-based approach to setting the housing target. We brought a motion here at the end of last year to affirm how important we think this is, as the arbitrary, centrally set government target is completely unrealistic. I've managed to come in under time. I think there's been a lot of kind of mischaracterization of these policies. The evidence is, the rules are, we have worked our absolute hardest to get this plan as like effective as it can be for the needs that the city has. So yeah, thanks to everyone. I commend this paper to full council, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to call on Councillor Hornshin to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and members. It has been a pleasure being a member of the Local Plan Working Group. Thank you everyone who's been part of it. We are living through an environmental crisis. Indeed, the IPCC predicts we will reach the crucial 1.5 degrees within the decade, the same time as this local plan. CO2 emissions from buildings and transport are some of the biggest emitters, we are told, in Bristol. But we have a housing crisis and all the health and social problems that come from not having a secure home. Some may think these crises compete against each other. This plan shows that the opposite is true. Sustainable homes in sustainable locations with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals baked into them. New homes will be required to meet high standards of energy efficiency, maximise on-site generation of renewable energy. We build closer together to maximise public transport links and shorten the distance travelled. Protecting employment spaces, developing local high streets and creating community spaces, making cycling, walking and mobility scootering safe and viable. Likewise, we have declared an ecological crisis. We need to treat it with urgency it deserves. It is crucial we play our part in reversing the decline in wildlife and nature, and this plan does that. Focus on building on brownfield sites, protecting countryside from urban sprawl, leaving a network of green spaces, corridors across the city. No artificial grass. More weight given to the importance of hedgerows, my particular favourite, wildlife-friendly landscape treatments, infrastructure for pollinators, and the introduction of hedgehog holes and swift bricks in new homes. With thanks to our parliamentary species champion for swifts, our local MP, Kerry McCarthy. Tree planting in all areas of Bristol close to where they are needed. A commitment to the urban food growing close to people's homes, hopefully with community involvement. I'm missing a piece. I hope that we won't have too many different disagreements. I would caution other members who have relatively minor grievances with the plan against throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's taken a lot of cross-party work to get here with the help of officers, and we don't want the developers to be able to do whatever they like and not listen to the people of Bristol. We must build a city that is good for its people, that is good for nature to thrive and for everybody to enjoy. I ask you all to back this plan and make a more sustainable future for Bristol.
Thank you, Councillor, and with time to spare. How do you do that? Councillor Mark Weston, to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. It obviously takes the dark magic of a hallowed eve for me to stand up and find myself in agreement with the Mayor, and I hope that no one else holds that against me in any future debates. It always reminds me, this is my second local plan. I was there on the first one. I think Councillor Breckles was chairing that particular iteration at the time. And I'm sort of reminded of the Mark Twain quote, you know, buy land and not making any more of it. Now, I'm not advocating mass compulsory purchases, but the Mayor was right when he said they're not making any more land. What we have here is we need to find a balance. And I think if we view the local plan through the telescope of a single issue, we will always be able to find something to die in a ditch over. But what we have to do is look at the broad spectrum of what our city needs and go for the balancing act that puts the needs for housing, with transport, with education, with the ecology, environment, all of it together. And so the pursuit of perfection can sometimes get in the way of the good, and this is a good plan. Yes, although we each of us can find some concern, no doubt, and should we say I have some concern about what possible iterations a mass transit might come out, but we don't need to worry about that. We can work that one down the line, but what we need to do is actually have a plan, because not having a plan makes it a free-for-all. Now, I realise as a Conservative, rampant capitalism is a lovely thing. However, I think we could probably all agree, even me here, saying unfettered, it's probably not a great idea. If we don't have a local plan, then the developers get whatever they want, because you have no grounds to refuse it. And this plan is good. It has the proper, I think, balance of housing. It is allocating sites, predominantly on brownfield sites for development, to deliver the evidence-based housing target that we need. I think it takes a pragmatic approach when it talks about green space, when we're talking about the differences between local green space and reserved open space. And it is an important distinction. I know some people think that reserved open space is a lesser protection. It actually isn't. It just recognises that sometimes you need to do some development on a site to benefit the site or the community overall. And the classic one for me in Henry Brentry is the Tranmere Avenue open space. It's a reserved open space, and the reason for that is it's next to a railway line. If we ever get my beloved Henbury Loop, fingers crossed, then we're going to need to put a platform on one side of that line. Well, that would be where it's going to go. We're not saying we're going to cement all over it, we're not going to build houses on it, but occasionally you need to do something that unlocks the potential of a site, and that's what it is. This plan is a good balance between all the competing interests in the city. I'm proud to be a part of it, and particularly I'd say thank you to the officers that have been so tirelessly, as we've talked about student numbers and all the rest of it, or everything that comes at parking problems, local high streets, that have patiently worked with us. To Nicola, thank you for your chairing. To all the committee members that have been part of it, and all the public that have fed into it, I think this is a good plan. We can back it comfortably. I'm very at ease with it, and I can't believe I agreed with the Mayor. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. I'd like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thanks, my Lord Mayor. Unlike the others who have spoken, I've only been on the local plan working group for a year and a half. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure that when my whip first suggested it, I truly knew what I was taking on. That said, now it's moving from the development phase, moving on from the development phase, I feel like I need to find another hobby to fill my Monday nights once a month or so. I too would like to pay off tribute to the officers, some of whom have retired or moved on during the short time that even I've been on the working group. But putting together this plan has been a huge undertaking, as you can tell from its size, and one which sought to accommodate the views of the consultation responses, views of the working group members, all the while remaining consistent with the national framework and being defensible in front of the Planning Inspectorate. We have pored over policies, sometimes tweaking the odd word here or there, other times asking for substantive redrafting. I think the result is a testament to both our officers and cross-party working. My colleagues have already outlined a number of the key policies that are contained within the document. But of course, in a document this large, no one is going to agree with everything. There are inevitable compromises and there are inevitably judgment calls which some members in this chamber and people and organisations beyond it will take a different view. In this regard, I want to acknowledge the representations made by the Bristol Tree Forum. This is an area in which the working group have sought and been given reassurance that the plan is both robust and defensible. And this isn't the end of the line, of course. They can and they will, I'm sure they will, make formal representations over the coming weeks. But today brings me back full circle to my first meeting, where there was a recap on the green belt allocations within the plan. At that meeting, I expressed some concern about the declassification of the Brislington green belt, partly on behalf of my colleagues whose ward it falls into, and partly because of my own concerns about the sustainability of developing that site, given the current state of the infrastructure on the A4 corridor. And I came back to it when Brislington Meadow development was given the go-ahead. On that occasion, I was a lone voice in looking to reopen the discussions and allocation. That's fine, that's part of being a working group. Now, I recognise that unlike most allocations, this one has an associated policy which addresses most of my concerns, and to be fair, most of those of my colleagues. Regrettably, though, it does not go far enough for my colleagues in Brislington West, who would have liked to have seen an additional clause, in line with the current policy, that would hold it as a contingency in the event of a 5-year land supply failing. We've been told that this would not be a sustainable position when the plan is examined, despite the fact it would not have an impact on the overall deliverable target within the plan, and we have also been told that we're unable to put it to Council for consideration of members. Sadly, therefore, my colleagues from Brislington West feel compelled to vote against the plan, and the rest of the group will be abstaining in recognition of that. Notwithstanding, I am committed to continue to work with my colleagues on the cross-party group as we go forward and as we go into the consultation phase. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd like to call on Councillor Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I too welcome this plan. And I'm in the even more amazing position than Councillor Weston, that I was agreeing with some of the things that the Mayor was actually saying as well. I think it's important that we get the balance right, and that is that we use the brownfield sites intensively and that we put the development in the right place where services are close by, and that allows, hopefully, therefore, for the rest of the area around about to be protected, the green space. I mean, I'll give it by example of our ward. We have just one minor housing development site, no arguments with that, no problems at all. We have in train at the moment the Broadwalk redevelopment, which is an excellent environmental project and is absolutely necessary for regeneration for our area. At the same time, I look at the green spaces in the ward, and we have a good share in Knoll, and they're all protected. It's slightly puzzling, though, that whereas the park next to the proposed development is in one category, the park a few hundred yards down the road is in a different category. They're both parks, and I can't see why one has one degree of protection and the other the other. It just does not seem to be quite logical. I'm also slightly concerned that although there's no plans to build there, that our sports fields don't have the protection of local green space. So overall this is fine, but I would welcome some explanation on those details because I think that overall we've got the right balance.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Mayor Rees, Do you wish to respond?
Just to say, again, in line with the comments that have been made, and I think, Mark, I'll return the favour. I think the way decisions have to be made. There is a finite amount of land in Bristol. If we take an old plan into a modern times, it doesn't stop the world changing around us. It just means we are ill-equipped to cope with the world the way it is. There have been some dramatic changes over the last 9 years since the last plan, 2014 plan. Declaration of and recognition of climate emergency, ecological emergency. The population has continued to grow around us. As I repeatedly share when we talk about the housing crisis, 550,000 people by 2050. That's another 80,000 people living within this boundary, within these 42 square miles. So if we try to get perfection, we will get nothing. We have to put something down, which I think has been an epic piece of work. And then I guess the opportunity for this chamber going forward is to, dare I say, I don't want to hold up American politics, but in the way the Constitution has been applied, the local plan will need to be interpreted. There'll be some hard and fast things in there, but there'll be something to interpret and to apply. And this chamber's heightened awareness of the need to build an inclusive city, to tackle entrenched inequalities, to protect nature, to make life more efficient so that Bristol requires fewer resources to sustain life in the city's boundaries. All of these values can be applied to the framework that's now going to be in place for the future planning of this city. So again, congratulations. I guess the one thing I'll just throw forward to Steve, as I mentioned to it in passing in my opening, is the importance of working constructively with our neighbouring authorities. The housing market does not exist within Bristol's local authority boundaries alone. We cannot solve our housing challenges within our boundaries alone. And our neighbours need Bristol to be able to thrive because we are the city within the city region economy. So a cooperative, collaborative relationship that recognises that people live across our boundaries and don't necessarily respect local authority boundaries themselves is going to be incredibly important for the successful application of our local plan.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. This will be a vote. Please ensure you are in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. The vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. I can't see the result from where I am. Looks to be an awful lot of green up there. 55. 55 for, 4 against and 4 abstentions. Congratulations, you've moved a step closer to a plan. That concludes agenda item 8. Agenda item 9, comments from the Scrutiny Finance Task Group on the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. The Scrutiny Finance Task Group have submitted a statement on the next agenda item, which was included in the published papers for this meeting, and full council notes this statement. Agenda item 10, medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. I'd like to call on Mayor Marvin Rees to move the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Finance has been the ever-present backdrop against which we've run this local authority, and this medium-term financial plan, known for short as the MTFP, is an iterative rolling 5-year plan covering 24-25 to 28-29, and it builds on the mid-year financial outlook and outlines the potential budget funding gap. So we expect our budget gap to continue to grow so that the general fund base case forecast peaks at 32.1 million over the MTFP period, with 17.5 million pounds attributed to 2024-25. And as part of the budget and the service planning process, this gap will need to be closed and a sustainable budget achieved. So when factoring in further emerging risks and opportunities not currently assumed in the general fund base case, the base case funding gap position could vary from 4.7 million to 81.2 million. The MTFP process identifies that we will need to uplift the general reserve by at least £1 million for each year of the MTFP in order to ensure our financial sustainability and resilience. And in support of the continued close management of reserve funds, the reserves policy has been updated. The housing revenue account operates as a ring-fenced account and includes all expenditure and income incurred in managing the council's housing. The total resources available to the HRA are forecast at around £851 million over the MTFP period. The Dedicated Schools Grant, known as DSG, ended the financial year in 2022-23 with a cumulative deficit of 39.7 million and is forecasting an unmitigated deficit of 136.7 million by 2028-29. But working with our partners, we're progressing into the first delivery phase of the long-term mitigation plan, delivering better value, SEND. Projections indicate that the DSG could achieve annual sustainability by 2026-27. The MTFP assumption for public health is that, as a ring-fenced account, this service will continue to operate on a principle of self-funding, and as such, it will seek to contain additional costs and any new pressures. This report also includes a request for supplementary estimate for the Children and Education Directorate following its period 4 projection in year 12.1 million pound pressure. The MTFP closely aligns with the Council's capital strategy, which is also an iterative rolling plan. It covers the 10-year period from 2024-25 to 2033-34 and sets out a long-term framework for funding and for capital expenditure and investment decisions in respect of capital assets. Now, neither the MTFP nor the capital strategy constitute a formal budget. They provide the financial parameters within which, following the appropriate consultation and considerations, budget and service planning will now take place to ensure the Council sets a balanced budget. So I am grateful for the comments from Scrutiny Finance Task Group at this meeting and at the Cabinet meeting this month. The timing issues around the Clean Air Zone and the CTRS are acknowledged, but we'll continue to share more as we progress to the budget setting process. After more than a decade of austerity, the MTFP captures the stark challenge of local government finance in face of increasing demand for our services and the rising costs of providing those services. We will continue the projects to improve efficiency in the councils so that we and future administrations can still have the opportunity to make the interventions which have wider benefits across the city of Bristol. The budget setting process which the MTFP underpins will be key to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd call on Councillor Tom Renard to formally second the report. I've given you the clue there that I didn't give Nicola.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second the report. So the medium-term financial plan provides an important tool to set the financial outlook for the local authority. And after more than a decade of austerity, we can see just how precarious the situation is for local government finance across the country, as well as here in Bristol. I too am grateful for the comments from the Scrutiny Finance Task Group, but at this meeting and at Cabinet earlier this month, scrutiny of our financial position and constructive challenge remains incredibly important. Now, with my housing hat on, I wanted to touch on the Housing Revenue Account, or HRA for short. As a reminder, the HRA Capital and Revenue Investment Programme is entirely funded from the ring-fenced HRA account. It has an investment programme that is driven by the 30-year business plan, which is currently under review. And there's a lot of investment required in our existing housing stock. Among other things, this includes our planned programme for major refurbishment projects, responsive repairs, compliance with the new social housing regulations, building and fire safety, addressing damp and mould, home adaptations, decarbonising our housing stock, replacing bathrooms and kitchens, reletting properties and tenancy management to support our residents. Inflation has continued to run rampant, following a very dangerous experiment with Trussonomics last year, and we will continue to pay the price for many years to come. This impacts our repairs, service and plan programme, alongside building new council homes very acutely with the inflationary uplifts that are outstripping CPI. But despite this, we remain committed to an ambitious programme of new council house building, seeking to deliver 1,750 homes over the next 5 years. This includes direct delivery by our teams in the HRA, planned acquisitions of homes through other routes, including our council-owned housing company, Gorham Homes. And I'm pleased to report the first of the homes of the company will complete in the next few months. If we're to make inroads into addressing the housing crisis, it will take the will of all parties to back much-needed homes across the city. We must also continue to keep our focus on the challenges of adult social care, children's services and temporary accommodation. Nationally, the annual bill for temporary accommodation stands at £1.7 billion. It is a national scandal that has got the crisis point because of the many failings of this national government, notably the impact of welfare reform and a continued failure to protect renters. And yet again, it's local government picking up the pieces and the tab for issues that national government could have avoided or gripped by now. I look forward to continuing to work cross-party in the months ahead to get to a set of budgets that will be proposed at full council early next year. It is going to mean difficult choices, and none of us can shy away from that responsibility. We all need to demonstrate the leadership to get this committee system that's coming off on the right foot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renard. Councillor McAllister, you're speaking for the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to offer the critical support of the Green Group for this medium-term financial plan. Firstly, I would like to thank all of the council officers who put this lengthy and complex document together and who briefed members of the Finance Task Group in detail. I welcome the MTFP as an essential step towards setting next year's budget. It gives a picture of the future of our budget situation and reaffirms, at least in writing, our commitment to equity, sustainability and environmental justice. However, it does not do the full job of putting the council onto a sustainable financial footing for the future. Even with all the savings included, we still face a nearly £20 million budget gap next year, rising to nearly £32 million at the end of the MTFP period. Barring some intervention from central government, the day will soon come where Bristol City Council is no longer able to meet statutory service levels. The primary cause of this is 13 cruel years of austerity from Westminster, starving public services of funding, and this has been worsened by financial mismanagement in Bristol City Council. The human cost is obvious. And dig a little deeper, and the false economics of austerity are clear. Infrastructure delivery takes longer and costs more. We close in-house provision to be faced with more expensive alternatives in the private sector. And the administration entertains the prospect of cutting poverty reduction measures to save cash, heedless of the economic and social destruction that would wreak. I must note here the ability of resources scrutiny to properly analyse the council tax reduction scheme cut proposals have been seriously weakened by the reopening of the consultation, which was deeply flawed from the outset, as Greens pointed out in scrutiny. Our concerns were brushed aside. The Green Group is very sceptical that this proposal will save £3 million, as it will damage local economies, and Bristol already has a low collection rate for council tax. My group has talked before about considering the city and our residents holistically. We need to invest in social capital, health capital and environmental capital, not just financial capital and infrastructure. Saving money now at the cost of weakening the resilience of the people of Bristol is both cruel and foolhardy and will cost us more in the long run. The orthodoxy of invest to grow is broken, so it is disappointing to see the administration so heavily prioritising economic growth instead of true social strength. We need to see an end to procurement breaches, we need proper accountability in financial management, and we must do more to retain our current staff and not let them burn out and walk away. The Green way of doing things is open, transparent and collaborative, and Bristol City Council would benefit hugely from an administration that upheld those values. Overall, the Green Group does support the MTFP as a statement of fact and of decisions already made, some of which we disagreed with at the time, and as a necessary step towards setting next year's budget. But balancing the budget without protecting the most vulnerable in our city is not good enough, and Greens will always strive to protect residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister. Councillor Gollop, you're up next.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. It would be easy to make a party political speech on a medium-term financial plan that shows a gap of £32 million, or potentially more. But this situation is far too serious for cheap point scoring. And if we look forward, for the committee model to work, we do need cross-party working. So in that spirit, I am going to address the points raised by the Finance Task Group, which has already been referred to and is in your papers, was submitted in my name, but has been agreed by members representing all parties. We've met more times than any of us care to remember. We particularly want to thank the Director of Finance and her team for an incredibly professional and open way of working with us, and we really appreciate that. And I also want to thank the committee members who've actually come together and been a fantastic group to work with. Now, we've made a number of points. We want to see greater emphasis on innovative invest to save. For example, reducing the financial impact of emergency temporary accommodation by using our surplus property, alleviating financial pressures with out-of-authority area children's care placements being brought within authority. There are others I could mention. I can't help but refer to the Council Tax Reduction Scheme review. The process has been less than satisfactory. And there is a real conundrum here that the administration do have to deal with. The MTFP assumes delivery of the £3 million savings from the CTRS review that parties voted for in the budget earlier this year. Any decision not to fully implement that will create a significant additional pressure within the MTFP. But I do need to mention to Council that the majority of members of the Finance Task Group do not support the proposals to change the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Go on to the Clean Air Zone. We do know that £5 million of CAS income is being used to pay this year's transport levy. But we've no indication of how much income will have arisen this year, let alone next financial year. My Lord Mayor, this income will be material to the Council. It seems inappropriate to have an MTFP that doesn't quantify it. The dedicated schools grant is massive. We don't know what the improvement plan is going to cost and how we're going to deliver it. We've no idea what the costs of failing to do so are. I could go on. The fact is, my Lord Mayor, that having discussed these issues with my group, we cannot support this medium-term financial plan, but we recognise it would be inappropriate to vote against it because of the very significant level of work that has gone into it. We're left with no alternative, reluctantly, to abstain. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gollop. I'd like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thanks, my Lord Mayor. Councils currently lack the financial stability to fulfil their potential. In fact, the scale of the challenge currently means that council finances are under pressure like never before. Not my words, but the cross-party words of the LGA submission to government ahead of the autumn statement. Bear them in mind, I'm going to come back to them later. Now, it can be frustrating speaking last in these debates, especially at the end of the night when you're all keen to get away or go trick-or-treating. Councillor Weston. So, spoiler alert, we'll be voting for this paper. Now, I could reiterate many of the points already made by colleagues across the chamber. I could refer to the Finance Task Group's submission included in the papers, which reflects the concerns of members across the chamber and on my party's benches. I could talk about the challenges that are facing councils across the board, as outlined by the LGA, particularly around children's services, adult social care, housing and homelessness. I could speechify about how, at my recent party conference, speaking to colleagues from across the country, the cost of temporary accommodation was a key concern. Or closer to home, I could recite about how our residents can struggle to reconcile the millions poured into Bristol Energy and the Bristol Beacon with the challenges outlined in this paper. I could declaim about the services that affect how residents perceive the council's performance, street cleanliness and tidiness, buses, and our parks and green spaces. How they're all being squeezed while we struggle to effectively deliver the key services for some of the most vulnerable groups in our city. I could put on my chair of audit hat and orate about how the external auditors have identified financial sustainability as an area of significant weakness for the council with a number of key recommendations. But ultimately, despite all that can be done locally to improve, and there certainly are things that can be done, everything comes back to the funding situation. To return to that cross-party LGA submission, which is worth reading in full, by the way, it says, "We are calling on the government to ensure that all councils have sufficient funding to deliver their 23-24 budgets, set balanced budgets for 24-25 and develop medium-term financial strategies that are not characterised by substantial funding gaps. Government will also needs to recognise that greater funding is needed to prevent the ongoing decline of local service provision. Funding levels need to be sufficient to allow councils to rebuild local service provision." So here's what I really want to say. We desperately need a new funding settlement. The current situation is unsustainable and sooner or later something will have to give. Indeed, we've seen it happen in authorities of different political stripes already. What I fear, though, is that we'll get more from a Chancellor who's reportedly told the civil service that it can hire more people, but only if they lay off the diversity managers first. We desperately need a new funding settlement, and if this current government won't deliver it, then they need to get out of the way and let the British people start making long-term decisions for a brighter future.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party. Gary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was part of the all-party working group and endorse what's been said by that group. I would go further than Jeff on it with regard to one item in particular, and that is the council tax reduction scheme. This really is the wrong way to do things. At a time when the poorest in society are struggling for all sorts of reasons, to actually say that they're going to have to find money that they've never had to find before is not good. It really isn't acceptable. And to actually put it in a way that the new administration are sort of lumbered with that problem is just unacceptable. As well as the effect on the people who are being asked to pay, I would think that we need to look at whether this is an efficient way to tackle that gap of £3 million. My experience years ago running that department of collecting council tax tells me that there will be a very large amount of money that will be spent trying to collect money from people who don't have it. And that really is an inefficient use of council resources. I'm also concerned about the lack of clarity with regard to SIL. This can be very large amounts of money. I mean, a scheme in my ward will generate £4 million SIL by itself. Now, not to have the detail and the projections as to how SIL is going to be used is a significant gap. And of course, the situation with the emission zone really is. The administration knows roughly what's coming in, and they can make a projection. To miss it out from medium-term financial plan completely, and to say, oh, well, it'll be okay because we'll put it into this year's budget, really is, it's not taking the situation seriously enough. And therefore, with those concerns that have been expressed by the group, I don't think that, I think there needs to be a rethink on some of these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Mayor Rees, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just talk around the context. I mean, the reality is we cannot come through 13 coming on 14 years of austerity without it actually having an impact on people's lives. If it was possible to do that, then local government would be totally inconsequential because no one would notice when it was being underfunded. And so it's going to land. It's the easier thing to throw stones at the local authority having to do that work of making those decisions. I mean, yes, that's the price of leadership, that you are in that kind of position. But rest assured, I mean, it has been a remarkable time for local government. We have faced a perfect storm, as we set out repeatedly. We've come through years in which we've seen increasing demand for various reasons, and those demands create more demand. The housing crisis creates more demand than our services. The cost of living crisis has created more demand. We had a global pandemic which created more demand. At the same time, we've had the increasing cost of providing services to meet those demands. At the same time, it's actually been very difficult to recruit the workforce to provide those services, both as a direct and indirect result of Brexit, but also, interestingly, as a consequence of our housing crisis with the unaffordability of life within Bristol. We've also, when we think about our services, faced very difficult decisions. Do we spend on crisis, or do we spend on prevention and investment in preventing crises in the future? Those are real-time decisions that have to be made in these organisations, and they are wicked decisions. I mean, and in fact, the scale of challenge facing a local authority financially is clearly illustrated by places like Woking and Birmingham and such. But on the whole, it's one in which local authorities could end up as places that simply provide adult social care and some children's services with no capacity to do anything else. And this chamber wants the council to do lots of things. Wants it to innovate it wants leadership on climate. It wants the backroom capacity to make the city function, and all that stuff competes. And it's something I've shared in this chamber so many times. We've lost frontline impact, but the invisible cost of austerity is the backroom capacity. Amongst that backroom capacity are accountants, lawyers, all those people that keep this organisation afloat and functioning and work in the city as well, and adding to that perfect storm. I would just say that in the public debate about this, we cannot, if we're going to say we don't like a saving in one place, we then should, as responsible elected leaders, say where we would be willing to make that saving. You cannot withhold an effort to make a saving in one place without it having a consequence for another area of the council. That's a conversation that rarely happens, just like when people oppose housing delivery, they rarely then go to the next step and say, well, where they would have housing, and people are let off the hook with that too much. I said in my State of the City, about the way we do politics, we cannot have everything we want all at once. And in fact, the reality of the world is we can't have everything all we want through time. We cannot be all we want to be as a local authority because the financial situation we find ourselves in is just not there. And I would just urge for future iterations of leadership, dealing with the consequences of our financial predicament is about how we move ourselves and energies around within this organisation, but it will make things like the one city approach all the more important as we think about the interdependencies between ourselves, health, criminal justice, education, private sector, voluntary community sector, trade unions in Bristol. So I would, whatever we say, I would just urge you to actually, with the committee, to actually start reaching out to our city partners to take a collective approach to city finance and city intervention, city leadership.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. Again, this will be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. The vote 15 seconds. Please vote now.
Sorry, I'm having an issue with my voting.
Is that recorded a vote?
No, we haven't recorded a vote, Councillor Ali, so if she wants to say which way she wants to vote.
Which way would you like to vote? Which way do you want to vote? For? Yeah.
So 49-4.
And the result, you won't be the first person that's done that. The result is 49 for, 2 against and 12 abstentions. So that is carried. That concludes agenda item 10. Thank you all for attending today's meeting. The next meeting of full council will be held on Tuesday the 14th of November. That's 1 hour 21 minutes. Not even close to a record.